Hey, this is Dr. Chad Kish. Just want to let you know we're going to be doing a virtual lecture here for Thursday, April 4th. This is PED 303, Healthcare Ethics, and I will go ahead and do a voiceover on this short PowerPoint. We'll review a little bit of Module 5 and do the last couple slides, and I will give you a preview of Module 6, which is Chapter 13, the Ethics of Epidemics, and give you the information that you need to do your virtual day. Not going to be a long one here, but a little bit of information to prepare you to do your virtual assignments. So we'll start basically with Module 5, End-of-Life Considerations, and Chapter 5, Ethics of Aging in America. We will review what we talked about on Tuesday briefly and give you a little bit of the information we didn't get to for the end-of-life considerations, and we will preview your virtual assignments to do on a remote day for Module 6, Ethical Situations in Health and Wellness. We will go over Chapter 13, the Ethics of Epidemics, which you will do some research on your own. And then next week, we will get into Chapter 14, Ethics of Disasters, which you need to do some reading before we get to class on that. And then we will wrap up the week next week in our new learning on Chapter 15, Domestic Violence, Changing Theory and Changing Practice. And the following week, we will get into our research projects. So let's start out here with the Module 5 review real quick. From the beginning of life to end-of-life decisions, there are many ethics, theories, principles, and decision-making models we can apply to assist us with making complex, critical decisions that impact not only ourselves and many other people. We've talked about the beginning of life back in Module 4 and all the different things, the new complex decisions that come into that. How we start life, how we have the advanced technology, the different decisions we even make in a partner when we decide to have a family, to have children, and then all the different decisions in life and as we age. So there's all kinds of different things now that we in Module 5 we talked about some of those end-of-life decisions, some of the different things we need to consider as we age, who handles that healthcare, where people live, like how they make decisions about, who's going to handle their care and decisions when they become incapacitated. So it's important to consider those end-of-life medical decisions and communicate them with family members. You might have a spouse if you're married, or maybe a common law marriage, different states. If you live together with somebody for so long, they give you some marital rights. A spouse in a homosexual relationship has different rights in different states. Parents, adult children, siblings, close family members, maybe trusted proxies, and have some legal things if they have something in writing, such as a power of attorney. So then we'll look at some of those different directives that we talked about that can help people have decisions made throughout their life. So, we talked about advanced directives, and we'll review that briefly here. But unfortunately, most people die without advanced directives in place. So, I gave you some examples and some sample formats. So consider discussing those with your family as you go home for the summer here. It's real important to have those. Luckily, my parents put those in place, so we kind of know what we're going to do as they age. And if a tragedy happens, we have things in writing and with all their different decisions they make on different situations. So for power of attorneys, you should have a system of proxies in order, beginning with the spouse and different family members flowing through different decision makers. If in emergency situations, if they can't get a hold of somebody, or as things change, or if somebody's no longer alive or available. So that's very important, like that you have those advanced directives in place and you've discussed these things. So let's review a couple important things we talked about on Tuesday. Competency was a big one. It's important to consider that as we talked about, like autonomy and competency, and how that goes back to a lot of our principles that we talked about back in Unit 1 in the first month or so of our class. So competence is an important factor in determining consent when somebody goes in to get a medical care, can they give consent to have a procedure? Do they give consent to withhold treatment? So um, we need to consider competence, and like that's also an important factor in what the medical professional might consider um, when they're passing their own judgment on to people. So it considers an individual's autonomy a lot. Like, can they make their own decisions? So remember, it's not only a medical judgment, it's not a thing that's 100% fact. There's not a universal training on competence. It still does bring in some opinion base of the person determining competency. So it's not only medical, it brings in a lot of other things, and we talked about that in class. So remember, it's not purely based on rational thinking. So somebody might be competent, but have some irrational things or some judgment that might seem irrational to us. They might have some judgment that we don't agree with or we think is irrational. So remember, it's not purely based on rational thinking. There's a lot of questions. So we may allow someone to refuse treatment if they're competent, but they seem to make an irrational decision based on our beliefs. So remember that, like, we can't bring in our own biases. So remember, the label competence is a label that we apply to a person after we examine their physical and mental conditions. So we're going to look at their physical ability. We're going to look at their mental conditions. Are they having a mental break, a psychotic break? We're going to look at their physical conditions. Are they conscious, or do they have, drug and alcohol dependence? Are they, under the influence right then? And then we also have to look at some different legal things, like what's the age limit right now? Are they under legal sanctions with anybody, or at the time? And then we have to look at some social implications. Are they under duress? Are they under coercion of somebody? So we're going to have to look at some of those things too as we determine competence. And we talked about, that domestic violence, or are they afraid because somebody's in the room with them to speak their own mind? So there's all kinds of things: physical, mental, legal, and social things that come into considering competency. So the criteria used to determine competence is not always 100% precise. It still may somewhat include our own prejudices, and we have to be careful not to be biased in our decision making here. So how do we assess for competence? So there's 4 important criteria to determine it. First of all, does the person understand the situation? Do they understand their condition? Can we talk to them and we explain it, and they can kind of summarize it back to us? Like, we have to explain it and they have to be able to summarize it back to us. Next of all, can they appreciate their treatment options? Can they understand the consequences of all of the different treatment options? Like, yes, I understand the benefit and I understand the consequence or the harm, the possible, good and bad from each decision, treatment option I would make. So I appreciate all of it, and I can think through and sort through and get through the different options and make a decision, not just, I just want to do that, make a quick decision. Do they have rationality? And this is not one that has to 100% be based on us, but does the patient refuse treatment on some rational reasons? And it has to be their rationality. Next, religious beliefs. And the religious beliefs have to be acceptable and entitled to First Amendment protection. It can't necessarily be that of a cult or a religion that's not accepted, or a belief that's not actually believed by that religion that they quote. So you might have to do some research on all of these different things. And then, like we talked about in our journal articles, or our journal discussions in class, like if they give you kind of some reasoning, always do a little bit more. Like, I've lived a good life and I don't have anybody to take care of me, and I don't have the finances. Well, bring in that social worker and talk to them. So if it's an end of life decision, that has some finality. So always go that extra step. So remember, if answers to all 4 questions are yes, the patient's more than likely competent. If any of them are no, that doesn't mean they're incompetent, but that means you've got to probably get some more information before you make a decision. So let's review advanced directives real quick. Advanced directives, that's remember a big category, and there's different types of advanced directives, and we covered three of them. But advanced directives are oral and written instructions about future medical care should somebody become unable to make decisions. They might be unconscious, possibly in a coma, too ill to communicate, or they might not lack the mental capacity to understand or be competent anymore. So these are different legal documents that detail healthcare decisions for somebody while they're still alive but unable to make those decisions or possibly speak for themselves. So we talked about three of them. The power of attorney is basically, it can be done on different things. It can be a blanket power of attorney, one that is done for everything, allows people to make all the decisions for you, financial, legal, medical, or it can just be based on one thing. We talked more about the medical ones, so somebody can make some medical decisions for you. Another type we talked about is the DNR, which is one that a lot of people have heard of, the do not resuscitate. And it might also be a DNI, which is a do not a do not incubate. Remember that was with the birds, but I think it cut off on the last slide on me. But a do not intubate. So remember that means they can't provide intubation, basically putting the tube down your throat, or do CPR. It doesn't mean they can't do other procedures. And then a living will basically goes over all the different situations at the end of life when they might take you off of life support in different situations. So let's talk a little bit more about understanding death. End-of-life decisions should respect patient autonomy and the right to balance benefits and burdens. This is some new material that we didn't go over. So we're tasked with this benefit versus burden concept, even if the ultimate decision leads to death. So people should have that opportunity to make their own decision. They should have autonomy, especially if they're competent. So this sometimes is in conflict with the decision of the family. Sometimes a healthcare professional or a family member may want to continue treatment. They think that they should be able to, a doctor will be like, well, I can save him, or a family member is, I want him to hang on. But, that person may be like, I've lived a good life, or I'm suffering, or whatever the case. A U.S. Supreme Court decision in the case of Cruzon versus the director of the Missouri Department of Health allowed a patient to have the absolute right to refuse treatment and die. So that was even a Missouri court case. So if the patient is competent, they get to make their own decision. They have that autonomy, and if they want to withhold treatment, they have their own right to do that, and they get to make their own decision, even if it leads to death. So conflict can occur when the patient's end-of-life decision may be somewhat in question. People don't kind of agree with it. Well, why would you want to do this? Like, they're kind of maybe waffling a little bit. It could be unclear, so that's why those living wills are important. Like, maybe they got in a car accident and they can't communicate with you real well, and in the past they've said, I wouldn't want to live in that state, but you're not really that sure if they've met that state. It was 20 years ago when they talked about it. The life has changed, technology's changed. Maybe that conversation was unclear. That was at a different time in life. So maybe it's kind of that end of life decision is slightly unclear, or it's unknown. Maybe you just never had that conversation. They don't have a living will, and they really can't communicate with you effectively. So, and there's no advanced directive in place. So conflict really occurs then. So that's why those advanced directives are important, and really having those conversations is hard anyway. So most people express, though, when their time comes, they want to die with dignity. They want to die without going through extreme pain, and they want to die on their own terms. So people kind of want to have that autonomy to make their own decision. They don't want to have other people make that decision for them. So we'll wrap up our last part of Module 5 with the family's role in final decision making. So we'll start out with a law, the Patient Self-Determination Act of 1990. All patients should be informed of procedures and be able to direct their own healthcare options. So that was a law that came into effect. It's a federal law. So the patient should be totally informed of all their healthcare options, and they should be able to direct and have a say in all those options and what treatment they get. They should be totally informed of all the different options, the pros, the cons, the benefits, the burdens. They should have an understanding of them and then get to make their own decision. If they cannot make the decision, then they should be allowed to use advanced directives, including all the different ones we talked about in the past. And then if nobody's around, there are no advanced directives in place, then the medical professional or doctor on call, whoever gets that decision-making role, should make the best decision for them within that healthcare situation. So if the patient cannot direct their own healthcare, like I said, the POA becomes a proxy decision maker. So whoever holds that POA gets to make the decision. So if there's somebody with a power of attorney, if the patient is rational and can communicate, remember they make their own decisions, not the power of attorney. If the person labels someone the power of attorney, they usually trust them, have an important relationship with them, then you allow them to make the decisions. Now, in a medical emergency, like they're not going to have a power of attorney pinned on their chest. In today's day and age, you know, if the hospital's there locally and your primary physician's there and they look you up real quick in their system and they see that they can make a quick phone call and communicate, then maybe, but the power of attorney might not be there in or even known in an emergency situation. So if there's no power of attorney on file, the family is assumed to be the best position to make life and death decisions when the patient is unavailable to due to competence or maybe unconsciousness or an emergency situation. So that's the natural assumption. But there can be another natural assumption in which they're not considering when maybe the family acts selfishly. Like maybe they're not that close with their parents. Maybe there's, if you watch some movies and TV shows and things, there's some financial windfall if the parent doesn't make it because I'm in the will. There's all kinds of different things. So it's always still an assumption that the family is making the best decision for their loved one. It doesn't necessarily mean they are. So family members that appear to be disinterested parties or making a poor decision, medical professionals may go to their board there of ethics or talk to the healthcare professional that is directing the emergency services. And family members could temporarily lose the rights to make end-of-life decisions if they seem to not be making a good decision. So, this could be if they feel that they're looking at inheritance or may have a deteriorated relationship with the parents or are considering different things. Maybe they're overhearing them talk about the burden to work, have to have the parent at their house, or not considering the finances, or not really even considering all the different treatment options and appreciating them, or not even considering the statistical circumstances, just making a quick decision. So once in a while, the family members that appear to not have the best interest in the patient might temporarily lose that right. So remember your assignment, beginning of life to end of life situations. So you're going to use all of your background learning from this class to discuss stuff. So you're going to discuss things we've learned in the last two modules, module 4 and 5, from beginning of life to end of life. And you're going to provide well-written, factually correct, originally prepared answers. They need to be aligned with the things we've learned. All right, so either from the textbooks or our discussions in class or our lectures. And you need to then justify your answers with information from Unit 1 with a application of a theory, a principle, or a law. So you can't just say, I believe this. You have to say, I believe this, and then this is why, and you have to back it up with one of those ethical theories, one of the principles, or one of the laws you learned back in Unit 1. So there's 6 different things you're going to write a a paragraph on. So a paragraph needs to be 4 more detailed sentences that are detailed and factually correct and thoughtful. So you want to discuss ethics, principles, rights, and laws associated with surrogacy. Give us your opinion, and then back that up with something from Unit 1. For 2, you'll discuss the child's point of view in advanced reproductive technology. So remember, we talked about the child's point of view. So discuss that and how advanced reproductive technology comes into play there, and then back that up with a theory, principle, or law. In 3, discuss various healthcare issues related to the aging population in the United States. So that was from our Module 5. And then talk about a theory, principle, or a law. So you could, various means talk at least about 2 healthcare issues. Discuss the process to determine competency in healthcare situations, and then tie that into a theory, principle, or law. Discuss the complexity of various end-of-life considerations, including the family's role in decision-making for number 5. Tie that in with a theory, principle, or law. And then describe advanced healthcare directives, all 3 of them, and then tie that in with a theory, principle, or law. And that is due Thursday. So this is not a discussion, this is just an assignment. So here's the new information. So we have no class on Thursday, April 4th. I'm going to briefly go over our information for your hybrid day. There's no class. So we'll have a discussion, Ethics of Epidemics, and that will tie into reading. I'll go over that in a minute. Your initial posting is Friday, April 5th, and it's due at 10 p.m. I back that up to 10 because your research paper is due Friday at 8 p.m., so I give you a little bit more time. And then you're going to have 2 responses to classmates on that discussion that's due Sunday at 8 p.m. Remember your research paper, that's posted in Module 7 on Ethical Theories, Principles, and Decision-Making Model. That's your application project, so it's your research paper. It's due Friday at 8 p.m., so you got that back before spring break. You've had plenty of time to work on it, and you know your topics. So you'll turn your research paper in on Friday. Don't be late. If you're a day late, you'll lose 25% of whatever you earn. Make sure you follow your rubric. You use headings. Make sure you use headings and use citations and references, and you proofread it before you turn it in, and you do a really good job on it. It's a major assignment. And then the next thing you'll have is a Chapter 14 reading quiz, which is in Module 6. It'll pop up on your to-do list. There's 8 questions and a 16-minute time limit, and that's due Monday at 11:59. And we will get into Chapter 14 on Tuesday. I expect you to read that so we can have some good discussion on that. So if you haven't yet already, you should have read Chapter 5, Ethics and Aging in America. And that'll help you do your first assignment that I explained. And then Module 6, which is our hybrid Thursday, you should read Chapter 13, Ethics of Epidemics. That'll help you with your assignment that I'll explain in a minute. And I'll go over our Module 6 objectives, which actually will be on Thursday, your hybrid day, as well as next week. So we will be in Module 6 for Thursday and all of next week. And then, so your next week, before next Tuesday's class, you should read Ethics of Disasters, the planning and response of those, which is Chapter 14. And then you should also skim Domestic Violence, Chapter 15, Changing Theory and Changing Practice, because we will go over those 2 next week in class. So here's your Module 6 objectives. You want to investigate, critique, and cite evidence on violation of public health ethics by analyzing and determining the ethical theory, principle, or law it violated. We want to interpret, explain, and discuss how concepts like autonomy, paternalism, and the stewardship model can be applied to the ethics of healthcare. We want to explore, examine, and analyze ways to reduce the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic to justify a logical argument. And then we will get into investigating, classifying, and discussing the definitions, types, and various examples of disasters to analyze the agencies and ethics for planning and responding to each disaster situation. We're going to do that next week. We will also discuss, analyze, and develop organizational and personal emergency management plans, and you'll actually develop a personal management plan as an assignment, a personal emergency management plan. We will discuss and explain domestic violence and its complexities as a public health concern. And we will investigate, examine, analyze, and describe laws to protect against domestic violence and detail various resources for victims of abuse. So that's what we will do in Module 6. So Chapter 13, discussion on ethics of epidemics. It's a three-part assignment with then your fourth part is your follow-up discussion responses. So your three-part initial posting, and make sure you use headings. Part 1, violation of public health ethics, and then use your letters A, B, and C. So part 1, you're going to complete research on an internet search engine and find an article about a violation of public health ethics, and it needs to be related to an epidemic or pandemic. The first part is A, you're just going to paste the hyperlink there. B, you need to provide a summary, which is 4 or more sentences, a paragraph. So put a well-written summary of the article, and your summary needs to explain why it was a violation of the ethics of public health and detail, the epidemic or pandemic it was about. And then in C, you need to list and explain. So don't just list it, list and explain. Give me a couple of sentences. What ethical theory or principle that your situation violated, and explain how it violated it. All right, so list it maybe in a sentence, and then explain in detail how it violated that theory or principle. So that's your part 1. In part 2, this is going to come from the textbook. So closely read pages 216 and 217. You should read the whole chapter, but really closely read it, and this is where this part of the assignment comes from. And you're going to answer the following 2 questions. So in 3 or 4 sentences, explain the differences between these 2 concepts, autonomy and paternalism. So you might want to define autonomy in a sentence or 2, define paternalism in a sentence or 2, and then discuss the difference, and be sure to include like anything that might tie to a principle. All right, think about principles we learned. So B, under part 2, in about a paragraph, 3 or more sentences, fully detail the stewardship model. All right, so this is the stewardship model that countries or companies consider with the ethics of epidemics. This goes back to our chapter material. And then part 3 is the COVID-19 pandemic. So you'll complete some external research on an internet search engine again, and this is real similar to part 1. You want to find an article, but it needs to be on reducing the spreading of the COVID-19 pandemic. So your article must be on reducing the transmission or spreading of the virus. All right. So I provided you some examples there. So A, you're going to just copy and paste the hyperlink, and B, a paragraph 4+ sentence summary of the article, and it needs to identify and then explain and summarize the article on how they talk about reducing the transmission or spreading of the virus. And then C, in 2 or more sentences, explain if you agree. So this kind of ties in with your research paper a little bit. Do you affirm or you disagree, dissent with the article, and then provide your personal reasoning as why you agree or disagree. And then D, you're going to tie that back to an ethical theory or principle to justify your personal reasoning in a couple sentences. And then that's due Friday at 10 p.m. And then Sunday, you'll have your second major part to this. Now there's part 1, 2, and 3 in your initial posting, but your 2 responses to classmates, and make sure that they give some information. All right, don't just write a word or 2. All right, in the Canvas assignment, it tells you how much information you need. That's due Sunday at 8. So your to-do list, beginning to end of life situations, Thursday, April 4th at 8. Your research paper, located in Module 7, is due Friday at 8. Your discussion, Ethics of Epidemics, your initial postings Friday at 10. Your 2 responses to classmates Sunday at 8. Your Chapter 14 reading quiz, which is located in Module 6, is 8 questions, 2 minutes per question, so there's a 16-minute time limit. That's due a minute before midnight, 11:59 on Monday, April 8th. So we'll take a quick look ahead. After we get done with our last module on Module 6 next week. We will have our exam for Unit 2 here. So our basic exam information, there's going to be 50 questions with a 100-minute time limit. Your exam question type will be selected response questions. So that means they're either multiple choice or they'll be true and false questions. Most of them are going to be multiple choice. Your basic exam information, have academic honesty. It's an individual assessment. It's open book and open notes. You can use your book and notes, not anybody else's. The questions to promote academic honesty, they're randomized questions and answers. So your number 1 or 2 will be different than somebody else's, and your answers, A, B's, and C's, will be all randomized. So your A's and B's and C's will be different. There's one best answer, select that. But once you select an answer, you can't backtrack and go change it. So the test timeline, it'll open Thursday, not this Thursday, but next Thursday at 8 a.m. and it closes Sunday, April 14th at 10 p.m. So you'll have a couple of days to take it. It'll open after we finish the material off. So here's your exam material that's on it. Module 4, Beginning of Life Considerations, which is Chapter 3 and 4. Module 5, End of Life Considerations, which is our Ethics of Aging in America, Chapter 5. And then all of our Module 6 information, which we started today in this hybrid lecture with Chapter 13, The Ethics of Epidemics. And we will finish off next week with Chapter 14 and 15, Ethics of Disasters, how we plan and respond to those. And then Chapter 15, Domestic Violence, Changing Theory and Practice. And then after the exam, we will get into our presentations of our research projects. If you have any questions on any of this, send me an email. Don't wait till the last minute, and I will try to go over anything with you.